Hi everyone, this is Ray. Some of you might know me as Tiki with Ray, so you can see ourselves in the mirror as we're filming.
That's right.
That's not creepy at all. It's like your own. It's like having your own audience. It's like
we're our own audience and eye candy. Unfortunately,
what do you do if you look back? If you looked in that mirror and all of a sudden you see yourself, but you're like looking at your phone, you're like, all right. Hi everyone. No, I can't stop seeing myself
in the mirror.
Hi everyone, this is Ray, or some of you might know me as Tiki with Ray, and today I'm with my friend Stephen Curran. We're in your home tiki bar. What's the name of your bar?
Rocking Jellyfish Lounge.
Rocking Jellyfish Lounge in Gig Harbor, Washington.
Harbor, that's right.
And you spent some time in LA.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about some of your tiki mugs from Los Angeles, but they're going to tell a story of old Los Angeles and Cliftons.
That's right.
And a couple other things too. And I can't wait to go down this road, but you made us a special drink for the episode.
We're drinking gimlets because we're going to talk about Clifford Clinton, the owner and founder who had this fascinating life of a restaurant called Cliftons. We're going to do a few 6 degrees of separation and historically, and a couple of times we're going to talk about the hard-boiled detective pulp fiction detective, a little bit of Dashiell Hammett, and a little bit of Raymond Chandler. Really, we're going to talk a lot about from 1931 to the present day.
The 30s.
Oh yeah,
So we're going way.
We're going way back. When we talk about Cliftons, we're talking about cafeterias. Cafeterias, which
that is literally what it is, right?
Oh yeah.
You go and you take a tray up and you get your food and stuff like that.
But these were legitimate restaurants, somewhere between the precursor to fast food and to actually between a sit-down restaurant and what we know as fast food today. Yeah. So these were legitimate places to eat. A lot of working class people on the clock could get food quick and easy. Yep. It was an easy way to feed families. And Cliff Clinton, and I'll call him Clifton and Clinton, but his real name was Cliff Clinton.
Cliff Clinton.
Yeah, Clifford Clinton. So Cliff Clinton, which was why he named his cafeteria chain Cliftons. And I'll get to that in a minute to distinguish from his father cafeteria chain. But what we're really talking about...
It'd be one of his father's name was Clinton Cliff.
There you go. Who had Clinton's cafeterias in San Francisco. So
Clinton's cafeteria.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we're really talking about 2 buildings. The Clifton's name in Southern California had maybe as many as 11 different cafeterias over the years. Okay. But really two buildings. One building is still in existence today, and it's Clifton Brookdale on South Broadway in downtown Los Angeles.
That is in downtown Los Angeles. Yeah. That is still there now.
Yeah. And now it's called Clifton's Republic, and also the Neverlands, I believe. Okay. Because it was sold, the family sold it in about 2010, and from 2011 to 2015 they did an extensive renovation, and it's an amazing place. Reopened it as a cafeteria and closed the cafeteria part, but it has kept a series of bars in there, including a tiki bar.
Like multiple bars?
Yes, multiple bars. Okay. 4 or 5. The other building we'll talk about is a building called Pacific Seas. Okay. And it was on Olive Street. Pacific Seas was on Olive Street.
So wait, you hope it was on Olive Street?
Yeah, it was on Olive Street. We've got the 1940 views of Clifton's Brookdale, which was what the building today was called, Clifton's Brookdale, and the other building, Pacific Seas, and they put together a brochure in 1940 to promote it. The Pacific Seas was an amazing building we'll talk about that was Clinton bought in 1931. It was already an existing cafeteria. He bought it from a competing cafeteria.
It was already an existing cafeteria.
Yeah.
So, like, was this a thing back then?
Oh, this was the thing.
Like cafeterias?
Cafeterias.
And the whole idea, and just for the record, we're talking about you go in, you'd have all the different food there. You literally grab a tray, and you'd be like, all right, give me some of the roast beef. Give me some of those mashed potatoes.
That's right.
Slide it down, fill up a piece of pie. And then you go to a counter, like a register, and be like, all right, okay, that'd be $10 and whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a thing back then. Okay.
That was a thing.
And that's literally what these were.
That's what these were.
Okay.
But these two buildings were two amazing total environments.
And just for the record, the Pacific Seas and the Brookdale, were these just cafeterias back then? Was there any bar equation to it at all?
No, because Clinton did not want to serve alcohol at either of these places.
It wasn't until recently with Brookdale.
Yep.
Well, would you say Republic now? Clifton's Republic, where they actually have bars now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But before then,
they didn't serve alcohol.
There wasn't any alcohol. Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Yep. And
Just wanted to lay that out.
Yep. So Pacific Seas was a pre-existing cafeteria. Clinton bought it in 1931 when he moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
Yep.
In about the end of 1938, beginning of 1939-ish, he kept it open during this time. He renovated it into the most amazing tropical restaurant, which unfortunately, when he sold the business to the family in 1960, it was demolished.
Hey gang, we'll get back to the tiki conversation here in just a second, but I want to let y'all know they have t-shirts for sale. They are screen printed in America. The artist is Tony Canepa, and they're going for $20 a piece, $25 including shipping. If you're interested in buying one, go to my website, tikiwithray.com, and then there's a tab that says buy a t-shirt. Click on there and just follow the prompts. So thank you very much.
So the Cliftons, the current Cliftons, has produced a number of mugs themselves for their bars, and we're going to talk about
Clifton's Republic.
Yeah, Clifton's Republic. And so they came out with some mugs, all Tiki Farm mugs. And
So this is an owl, though.
it's an owl, but does it remind you of anything?
Well, it's full on Art Deco, if I guess.
Yeah. But
How about the Maltese falcon?
Exactly.
So is this a falcon?
No, it's an owl, but
it
resembles a Maltese falcon, but it's an owl.
Okay.
So the tie-in then was in 1931. Cliff Clinton, left his father's restaurants in San Francisco. He had cafeterias in San Francisco called Clintons. So when he moved to LA, he wanted to distinguish himself from his father's restaurants. So he couldn't call them Clintons, so he put his first name and last name there in Cliftons. He came down from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
So his father already had his chain of cafeterias already going on in the Bay Area called Clintons.
Yes. Okay. Among other names, but some of them were in the family name, and so he didn't want to have confusion.
Yeah, it's not confusing at all.
Yeah, I know.
I want to make a distinction between me and you, Dad. All right, what are you going to name your chain restaurant, son? Cliftons.
There you go, and that's what he did.
Was there a competition between the two of them?
Well, one was San Francisco, and one was in LA, but they did have some falling out from time to time because Clifford Clinton was like the president and manager, and had a whole bunch of, I won't go into all the stories, but had a bunch of rivalries with his father because Cliff Clinton had a lot of ideas about how a cafeteria should be run.
Okay.
And they were novel ideas at the time, and he, wanted to express those ideas. His father was, I wouldn't say stuck in his ways, but had a way of doing things, and so the son sort of rebelled against that. And Clifford Clinton, I might add, was 30 or 31 when he moved to LA because he lived from 1900 to 1969. So kind of easy to remember his life history. So. So his age, so when we talk about years, we can quote his age. So his father did have probably one of his more successful cafeterias in San Francisco, a Clinton's, and opened it, as best I can tell, about September of 1920 in the Flood Building. This is the father, in the Flood Building in San Francisco, which is at Powell and Market where the cable cars turn around.
That's like downtown.
Yeah, it is downtown, and it's a building that survived the earthquake.
Is that building still there?
The building is still there. And
I think it is. I think I've walked by it, actually.
I haven't been in there since the 1980s. I had some jobs when I was young in the 80s in that building. But it is an amazing building because it speaks of both a Victorian but also a film noir era. It's marble floors, the offices with like marble on the side, and those wood transoms, with the wood. And they used to have old doorknobs. Again, don't know what they look like today. And Dashiell Hammett, the great, I guess we call him Pulp Fiction hard-boiled novelist.
Like the Dashiell Hammett.
The Dashiell Hammett. Okay. Probably, I'm certain, has eaten at Clinton's because he worked at Pinkerton's detective agency in the same building, the Flood building, with Clinton's father had the cafeteria. So that's my little 6 degree of separation. And he's the person who wrote The Maltese Falcon.
Gotcha. You have 2 of those.
I have 2 of them, and this is I love the red glaze better than the sort of orangey glaze. Raymond Chandler, he had offices in 1930 and 31 in the Bank of Italy building on Olive Street, right near the Cliftons, what later became Pacific Seas.
Okay.
Now, as we discussed earlier, Clifford Clinton didn't serve alcohol, and Raymond Chandler was fired from his job in the Bank of Italy building in the oil industry because of his promiscuous ways and his taking extraordinarily long lunches and doing nothing but drinking.
Yeah.
So whether or not he ate at the Cliftons, since they didn't serve alcohol, I'm not sure, since his lunches all seem to revolve around booze. But also in his honor, we have gimlets. There's a woman in Los Angeles who, with her husband, runs an esoteric company, and she's an expert on Raymond Chandler. She even wrote a novel about him and his detectives, Kim Cooper. And she has this handy map to sort of identify the places, because Raymond Chandler wrote about a lot of Los Angeles, but he changed the names of the neighborhoods and the buildings. But again, Raymond Chandler, much like Dashiell Hammett, worked in the same building as the cafeterias of the father. Raymond Chandler worked for a brief time right next door to the cafeteria of the son. Clifford Clinton, in 1931, he bought the restaurant. In 1938, he was designing it as Pacific Seas. And in 1935, he bought and then designed Brookdale as a whole forest, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. While he's doing all of that, he became a political crusader.
Okay.
And it's a long story, but the short story is because he was in the mid-30s, he was asked to go look at the county general hospital and their food services. And he found a lot of kickbacks and corruption, and kickbacks to a county supervisor who then became mayor of Los Angeles. Clinton found himself on the grand jury who had the authority to investigate the government. But many of the fellow grand jurors were either corrupted or not likely to look under rocks. He formed a minority cadre of a couple grand jurors and used his powers to investigate houses of ill repute, gambling parlors, and uncovered a lot of corruption, including corruption that apparently led all the way up to the mayor's office. His home in Los Feliz in, I want to say 1938, while all this was going on, it was at 37. But anyway, in that era, his home in Los Feliz, which he opened up to all his employees to go use the pool and go convalesce when they're sick, actually was bombed. And a big hole was there. He was out. I think he was out of the house, and his family was on the other side of the house. No one was hurt. But an informant, a former crooked cop who was sort of an informant to Clinton, was also, his home or car was bombed, and he was almost killed. And as a result, so the police captain who was assigned to investigate was the police captain who arranged for those bombings. And when that was uncovered, the scandal led, and Clinton led the recall of the corrupt mayor.
And he was recalled?
Was recalled. And all of this, he's renovating one cafeteria's Pacific Seas, and he had been running the Brookdale Cafe. And the Brookdale cafeteria was always billed as the biggest cafeteria in the world. Even though cafeterias were a thing, this was so big, because there were 3 levels of dining then. And now with the bars And the way they've opened it up, I think there's more like 4 or 5 levels, plus a basement. So it's a huge building. It used to be a furniture building built in 1904. But so while he's doing all of this, he's in the middle of, you can see this whole investigation, crooked cops. I mean, it's the whole LA Confidential, Chinatown come to life.
Oh my God.
And from this one guy, just incredible. And a lot of what drove him and the way he ran his operations and all of this was he was a very devout Christian.
Okay.
But he really believed in social justice and fairness, equality, and hated corruption. So that was really a driving force in him. So we'll detour to the next mug and talk about a type of architecture in Los Angeles in particular.
Hour. So that's a bar that's there now.
That's there now. So the Idle
And this
Hour,
is what it looks like. It's literally like a barrel, right?
That's right. And in the back of it is a building a small building in the shape of a dog with a pipe, bulldog with a pipe. It says tamale on one end and ice cream on the other end. And that is a reproduction of a building that once existed on Washington in Los Angeles that was torn down. They reproduced the dog building for the Peterson Car Museum to show what LA was like, because in the 1920s and 30s there were more than 70 of these. They're called programmatic architecture or mimic architecture or mimetech, or some architects call it ducks, after one in New Jersey that looked like a duck. So the idea being is that the architecture either represents an object, an animal, or what's inside of the establishment. And the Idle Hour is in North Hollywood, and as you said, it's been renovated and it's there. This reproduction from the Auto Museum got rid of it. They moved it back here. There's another reproduction of this dog that's on the Disney backlot somewhere of Disney Studios in Southern California, because it was used in the early 90s movie, The Rocketeer, which was a really good movie.
Oh,
yeah, and that featured this building. And so there's 2 reproductions of this building. But this is the programmatic architecture. The idea being is LA was the sort of founder of this movement, or the most of them, because of I think it's because of the big flat real estate and the car culture, even in the 1920s and 30s. And there were a lot of, and we talked about this in the show with theaters, but there were a lot of themed restaurants as well, some of with the architecture. Down the street from Tiki Tea on Sunset is El Cid, which is a flamenco restaurant and dining establishment. But in the 1920s, it was a jailhouse cafe, where people went in there and they had bars and stuff, and they were served by people with striped prisoners. And I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but you see this story. And in the mid 1920s, a bunch of crooks came into what is now El Cid, the jailhouse, whatever they called the jailhouse cafe, and they came and they said, "This is a robbery." And then people were applauding them, but when they left with all the watches, purses, and wallets of all the patrons, did they realize that it was a real robbery?
Oh, they thought it was this part of the act.
So as we've discussed, when we discussed total environments, you and I riffed on that. We discussed bars and the influences of tiki bars. LA had all of this wild architecture.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the Pacific Seas, the original Pacific Seas. So in late 38 and 39, I think he kept the cafeteria open.
Look at that. But even this mug, but this is it.
That's what it looked like. And so today's Cliftons has done this fog cutter mug in commemoration of the Pacific Seas. And they did a great job. Again, these are Tiki Farm mugs.
I would have loved to see Pacific Seas in the flesh. I bet you it was unbelievable.
I mean, their palm trees were over 25 feet tall that they built. There were a lot of neon. On the outside, there's the middle area that, we'll show pictures of that. It was a waterfall. They had lights up at night with all the palm trees.
Why the tropical decor? Why did he decide to go with that?
Because he and his wife, in about, years, disclaimer, some of this may be accurate, so follow this at your own risk. But in around 1937, they took a cruise to Hawaii.
Is Cliff Clinton still alive?
No, he died in 1969.
All right, then you have nothing to worry about that.
Yeah.
And like he's going to be like watching this video.
Oh yeah, video and go,
Steven, that's completely wrong.
He and his wife went on a cruise in around 37 to Hawaii, and he was so influenced by the tropical decor and everything else.
37 era.
Yeah, 36, 37.
And I bet you that cruise was a long trip.
Yeah, long trip. At least he left from L.A. or San Francisco, but yeah, long trip. Interestingly, I could never find whether he had ever been to Don the Beachcomber in Hollywood or not, because
here's the thing.
I don't know that he had.
Well, here's the thing. Like I'm looking at pictures of this.
Yeah.
Of Pacific Seas in this book, and I've seen pictures of the early Don Beachcomber restaurants.
Right.
And that's nothing compared to this.
No.
Like takes this over the top. Because when you look at the original pictures of like the original like Don the Beachcomber, it's the decor is there. The Beachcomber aesthetic is going on. Yeah, no doubt. But it's not like that.
No, this is tropical.
This is
over the
full
top.
on escapism.
Waterfalls is up.
And I wonder if Don Beach and maybe even Victor Bergeron pulled influences from Clifton.
It wouldn't surprise me. I guess we can talk about his other bar that we wanted to talk about, the Brookdale. And that was predated it, so it gets confusing. But he bought this bar in this cafeteria in 1931, fixed it up in 38, 39. Yeah. But in 1935, he bought the Brookdale, the world's biggest cafeteria, and fixed it up in about 35.
Okay,
as the world's biggest cafeteria, and it was over the top as well, but it was over the top with a forest theme.
A full-on forest.
Full-on forest theme. So I have a silly 6 degrees of separation, so bear with me, about the Brookdale. So Brookdale is a resort above Santa Cruz in California with big redwood trees. Okay. Fortunately, it was in...
An actual resort.
It was an actual resort, and it's now a hotel.
Okay.
It had swimming pools with the waters where you could have the mermaids back in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Clifton, when he was a teenager, spent a lot of time in the Santa Cruz Mountains. They had a great room. It's still there, although I don't know if it's been restored to its former glory, with a live stream running from the outside right through the middle of the room.
Like literally?
Literally. With, at the time, redwood trees inside the great room. And Clifton and it was a resort for a lot of rich and famous.
It sounded like a fever dream.
Yeah, in the teens and 20s. So to the bear, this is the new Cliftons, the Cliftons Republic. This is a mug they put together. They have a black glaze and a brown glaze bear. I just got the brown one.
The forest.
The forest theme. So and then that's why the Maltese falcon is not a falcon but an owl.
Gotcha.
And also they avoid some trademark and copyright issues as well. And again, they went with sort of a Cubist Art Deco theme.
That's a really cool movie.
Isn't it? It's amazing. I mean, it's unique, and it evokes a 30s to me theme.
Absolutely.
And so the Cliftons, Brookdale, and Brookdale again being that place in Santa Cruz, was a forested wonderland, and it had little stuffed animals and whatnot, but they also had streams running through it and a cave that you went to, which the new renovation kept or improved upon, and they made that the gift shop, and that's how you walk into the cafeteria in the new Cliftons before the cafeteria closed. It was really nicely done. It's just a wonderland. They used to have a big cutout of a tree, a redwood tree, and they would show like this is the tree ring when the Magna Carta was signed, and demonstrating it, and they had multitude levels and tiers of it, and it's just it was and I've been there many times in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just a wonderful place, and the current owners who they were supposed to renovate it for 18 months in about 2011. It took them 4 or 5 years to renovate it, put in the bars. They did a spectacular job. They opened it up. They put a huge fake redwood in the middle that is just stunning. They made a Gothic bar that almost looks religious, but that kind of has an overhang down to the below, and then there's a more private bar in the back, and stained glass peacocks. Then they have all this, all the taxidermy animals in one level that used to be a dining room and opened it up. Later on, the Seven Seas, the modern, to pay homage to the old building.
Pacific Seas.
Pacific Seas. I keep saying Seven Seas. I don't know why I do that. Pacific Seas, to pay homage to the old building. They built a tiki bar in there with a speakeasy entrance. They made a spectacular thing even better. The owners have closed the cafeteria food portion at the end of 2018.
Okay.
Now they're supposed to, they were going to build out a very extensive food court, and they still might. Now with COVID, I don't know where they are with that. But unfortunately, it sort of sapped the spirit and soul of the cafeteria out, even though it's more beautiful than ever, because Clifton's cafeteria always was a place where some shuffly looking, maybe even homeless people might grab a bite to eat.
Yeah.
And we have to mention that when it was the original Clifton's, these restaurants had a pay what you wish if you're not delighted, or you can eat free if you can't afford a meal. Wow. So his devout Christianity and childhood experiences when he was on missionary work with his lived when his father had missionary work in China when they were going through periods of starvation at the turn of the last century really influenced him, was a driving force. And in the Great Depression, he opened up a cafeteria, they call it, a basement cafeteria, because remember 1931 was a terrible time to open a restaurant. Because the Great Depression had hit Los Angeles super hard, right in the middle of bread lines and food lines. And he opened up where you could pay a penny or a nickel, and it would be a preset meal, but a good meal, and that people would line up around the street and do that. Now, fortunately, he was able to close that, but because otherwise the feeding of the people at his regular cafeteria was going to bankrupt him. But he was so committed to the idea that he opened up a cafeteria and probably made a loss on it, but of doing prepackaged meals, which fast forward to World War II, he was a pioneer in post-World War II reconstruction of Europe and Japan and people who are destitute and starving, like meals ready to eat equivalent to feed the world. And so again, this guy had just such an amazing foresight and colorful careers. The next mug.
The Bahuka.
And you can speak to the old Bahuka in Rosemead, because you said you were.
Well, yeah, I was actually down in California spending some time with some friends of mine. They know I like tiki. They actually introduced me to the tiki tea. So they used to live up in Seattle, then they moved down there and they're like, hey, do you want to go check out this tiki bar? This is its last weekend. But do you want to go anyway? I'm like, yeah, absolutely I want to go. And it was the Bahuka, and it was I've never seen so many aquariums in my life.
Yeah.
The whole place is just filled with like fish tank after fish tank after fish tank. The bar underneath it, there's like fish tanks, dark, a lot of wood. I mean, like when I think of a tiki bar, like again, it's like this is what I think of. And it was a shame that it was gone. So what's the story with this mug?
So the story of the mug is this was their 40th anniversary, and 2007, and as you pointed out, they never lived to the 50th anniversary.
No, but I think we're talking like 2013.
And so during the renovations and the Bahuka, a lot of the stuff, not the aquariums, although there was a gas station like former aquarium.
There's a lot of bric-a-brac in that bar. A lot.
So that bric-a-brac and a lot of the boats and nautical came over, and Bamboo Ben designed the Pacific Seas bar in the Republic, the Tiki bar, using elements of the Bahuka and some other bars. So they've been recycled into the Pacific Seas within the current
That is so cool.
And
that is so cool.
That now I haven't been to Max's yet in Grand Rapids, but that bar visually is the most stunning tiki bar I've been in. You go in a speakeasy entrance in the Cliftons. You walk up into a map room that looks like something, Art Deco, beautiful representation of a map of the world on a big wall. Just very Art Deco, almost a little colonial, like you need a pith helmet and a bow tie at the same time, to feel it. Then you walk into the expanse of the tiki room. There's a crisscross boat in the middle of it. There are two distinct bar areas. Somebody, I think Kevin Crossman, said, it's museum quality tiki, and it really is. And a lot of it's leftovers from the Bahuka.
So, is this a Disney mug?
That's a Disney mug.
So, what does this have to do with Cliftons?
His bars are said to have influenced Walt Disney in the creation of Disney World.
Is that true?
Well, a lot of people say it. I have every reason to believe that has a Los Angelino and Walt Disney's houses in the 20s and 30s and 40s were not very far away from Clifton's houses. So, and I'm sure Walt took his daughters to Clifton's, although I haven't found proof of that. The one connection is the architect who Clifton had designed both the Brookdale Forest and the Pacific Seas tropical cafeterias. He had a partner when he did the Pacific Seas in about 1938. He had two partners who helped design it. One of those partners, his last name is Beckett, was a close friend and neighbor of Walt Disney, an architect, and became an unofficial advisor to Walt Disney in Disney World. So it's hard to believe that somebody who had a hand in creating that total environment, who then was an advisor to Disney, an unofficial, confidant and friend about architecture, wouldn't have been influenced by that. And when you walk into the old, especially the old, but even the new Clifton's, Brookdale, you really feel like a sort of Frontierland, Adventureland thing.
It had to be an influence, at least subconsciously, right?
Yeah. Well, and again, if one of the architects who helped design one of these experiences is advising you, there's got to be some influence and commonality. Whether it's, like I say, direct or indirect, I don't know.
I mean, if there's any, I keep on thinking of that expression, "Go big or go home."
Yeah.
And it really seems to me when it comes to like the Pacific Seas or Brookdale, that was like his attitude. It's like, no, I'm going to do this like full over the top.
Yep.
Or not at all.
Yep.
And I bet you even like with Disney, he's like, yeah, this is we got to do this right. Or
so a Disney mug, but the reason he did not influence the Haunted Mansion, but the reason I have a Haunted Mansion Disney mug is there is a little bit of the, I guess, macabre or extra gothic at the current Clifton's Brookdale. So in 2010, the family sold it or I believe they sold out to the current owners who did the marvelous job fixing it up. They, a family in 2010 or 2011, before they closed for the renovations, they took their mother's ashes and they dumped them down a electrical or air shaft in commemoration of their mother in the Clifton's Brookdale. So she is, I guess, interred there, or his ashes were. Now, they may have been cleaned up in the renovation. I don't know. The woman's name, who had died a few years before, was Terry Richmond, and she was Cliff Clinton's mistress. So, which leads us to our last mug, and the end of Cliff Clinton's life, a little bit about Terry Richmond's life, and a little bit about Hollywood. So the story of the mug is, this is from Lano.
This is Lano?
Yeah, that's Lano, Hollywood. It's on Hollywood Boulevard. It is within 500 feet of Musso and Frank's. Musso and Frank's, for those who don't know, is a must-see in Hollywood. There's not a lot to see, actually, in Hollywood, but this is. And it's a famous bar where Dashiell Hammett had hung out with Lillian Hellman at the time, the author who he was with, I believe. Certainly Raymond Chandler had a number of gimlets and martinis there. They are world-renowned for their martinis. Always stirred, never shaken, by the way.
Okay.
Interesting. Opposite of James Bond.
Yeah.
And Musso and Frank's is old Hollywood. It is the film noir. It is, former literary center near where the bookstores were, and it's near where the Lano. Lano is not a tiki per se, although they have this wonderful
they serve tiki drinks,
mug.
and
their drinks are fabulous. The atmosphere is great. It's more of a fern bar, or I don't know what you call it. That does it a disservice because it's really a nice decor.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, they do have this wonderful tiki mug. And not coincidentally, although this is a red carpet mug in gold, and even has a sword, much like an Oscar, but it's a tiki mug. I just love it because of the Hollywood connection, and they are less than a block and a half away from McAdam Place, so which is today empty lots and apartments, but the street right off of Hollywood Boulevard where Don Beach had the first two Don the Beachcomber restaurants, long gone. So Lano represents Hollywood. Terry Richmond represents Hollywood in a very different way. And we move over to the 20th Century Fox lot in what is today called Century City. She worked at and this is how she met Clinton, she worked at a quote-unquote chiropractor's office.
Okay.
And she assisted gentlemen clients with massages. And if the client got excited, she would say, "Do you want me to take care of that, dear? Hands only." So she claims to have held the members of many a movie star. Now, what's fascinating was that Clinton, in about, I want to say 1960, early 60s, came into that establishment. Okay. Now, whether he came into that establishment to bust it up, in the 30s, he used to go into houses of ill repute, and then when the woman had disrobed, he would put out his grand jury badge and say, "All right, tell me what cops you tipped off to, as kickbacks," right? So, or whether he just frequented it because that was an outlet for him, I don't know. But they fell in love. He wanted her to get out of the business, so they had an apartment. I like to call it the Love Nest behind the, I believe it's behind Norm's in La Cienega. Norm's is the quintessential Googie. It's still there. Yeah. Coffee shop, just so LA. He had, in 60, he had sold his interest to his family. In 1960, the Pacific Seas original was torn down. So he was, I guess, found out, and his wife of many years, obviously was none too pleased, but he either threatened or actually attempted to commit suicide. And his wife basically had an arrangement where he could be with Terry, at certain times, would always come home to his family. And in fact, the two of them, the wife and the girlfriend, they actually took another cruise to Hawaii 20-something years after the cruise that led to Pacific Seas, and they each had separate staterooms. So they actually knew of each other's existence and hung out together. What's also fascinating was I think Clinton bankrolled Terry Richmond in her next thing that made her a fair amount of money, according to her son, who's written a great article from 2013 in the LA Weekly you can find online. Yeah. And also there's a great public radio podcast where he talks all about this. It's fascinating if you don't mind the R-rated subject matter. Just amazingly interesting woman and interesting family dynamic. Anyway, so he helped bankroll her in her new profession, which was to make edible gels and marital aids. So according to her son, she was one of the first in the sex industry to make the edible gels and was a pioneer in the marital aid, we'll call it, there. And yet, so we're talking about Cliff Clinton, who busted up the gambling establishment and houses of ill repute, the massage parlors in the 1930s. Now, a lot of it was because they were kicking back money to the government, but yeah.
So what you're saying, Stephen, this is a story that starts with Christianity and ends in edible panties.
Exactly. There you go.
Further reading. What's this?
Yeah. So this is Cliftons and Clifford Clinton, a cafeteria and a crusader by his grandson, E.J. the Third.
And this is a story about Cliff Clinton.
It's a story
Clifford
about
Clinton.
it. Yeah. It doesn't focus as much on the cafeterias. One thing it does focus on, and tying it back to Disney, is one other little evidence that he influenced Disney. Clifford Clinton and his staff.
Yeah.
His staff were called associates.
Associates.
Never employees.
Ah.
And his customers were always guests. And this predates Disney. Disney.
Disney stole all these, like, right there.
Well, but that goes to your point. It's had to have an influence, right? Yeah. Because he was the pioneer of that level of customer service.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, yeah, this was great. And thanks for doing this, because this is essentially pre-Tiki. This is Tiki before Tiki, and I think it's fascinating to know the history of what made Tiki as we know it start. This is the groundwork. So thank you very much, Steve.
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy we were able to tell the story through some mugs, and this has been a lot of fun and some gimlets.